The screaming alarm pierced through Jefferson High School's mathematics classroom at exactly 2:47 p.m., followed immediately by Principal Martinez's voice, crackling through the intercom system with words that would haunt everyone for months to come. This is not a drill. Code red lockdown. All students and staff, initiate immediate lockdown procedures. 17-year-old Marcus Johnson froze mid-calculation, his pencil hovering over the algebra problem he'd been working through. Around him, 30 other students dropped to the floor with practiced precision, crawling beneath their desks as Mrs. Henderson rushed to lock the classroom door and switch off the lights. The honor roll certificate Marcus had received just hours earlier, his name printed in elegant script, alongside 14 other students, crinkled slightly as he pressed himself against the cold linoleum floor. "What's happening?" whispered Aisha Patel, her voice barely audible as she clutched her backpack. Mrs. Henderson pressed her finger to her lips, her face pale in the dim afternoon light filtering through the blinds. Outside, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the hallways, accompanied by sharp, authoritative voices shouting commands that sent chills down every spine in the building. 3 miles away, the Channel 7 newsroom erupted into controlled chaos as breaking news alerts flooded every screen. News director Janet Walsh grabbed her headset and barked orders to her production team. "Get the helicopter in the air, now. I want live feeds from every angle. This is going statewide in 30 seconds." The red banner that would soon scroll across millions of television screens was already being typed, breaking multiple schools under lockdown, following reports of planned mass shooting in Jefferson County. But just 6 hours earlier, the atmosphere at Jefferson High had been nothing but celebratory. The monthly honor roll ceremony had taken place in the school's spacious auditorium, decorated with blue and gold banners that caught the morning sunlight streaming through tall windows. Proud parents filled the first 10 rows, smartphones raised to capture every precious moment as their children's academic achievements were recognized. Marcus had walked across that stage with his head held high, his parents David and Regina Johnson beaming from the audience. His younger sister Kesha had cheered so loudly that other families turned to smile at their obvious joy. The honor roll represented months of late-night studying, weekend tutoring sessions, and unwavering determination to excel, despite the challenges that came with being one of only 12 black students in his advanced placement classes. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Regina had whispered as she hugged Marcus afterward, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. "Your grandfather would have been so proud to see this day." The other honorees, a diverse group of 15 students, including Aisha, whose parents had immigrated from Mumbai 5 years ago, and James Chen, whose essay on climate change had earned him recognition from the State Science Board, had gathered for group photos with their families. The celebration continued in the school parking lot, where parents exchanged phone numbers and made plans for a joint celebration dinner the following weekend. That joyful scene had been observed from a distance by Linda Watkins, a 43-year-old real estate agent whose son Trevor had not been among the honored students. Linda stood near her white BMW SUV, her manicured fingers gripping her phone as she watched the celebration with growing resentment. Trevor's report card, tucked inside her designer purse, showed mostly C's and D's, a stark contrast to the academic excellence being celebrated just 50 yards away. "It's not fair," she muttered to herself, her voice carrying a bitter edge that had become increasingly familiar to her neighbors and coworkers. "These kids get all the advantages, all the attention. What about American children like Trevor?" Linda's frustration had been building for months. She'd attended 3 school board meetings, demanding to know why certain students seemed to receive more recognition and opportunities than others. Her veiled references to minority students hadn't gone unnoticed by other parents. But the school's administration had maintained their commitment to merit-based recognition, regardless of a student's background. As the honor roll families began to disperse, Linda made a decision that would soon terrorize thousands of innocent children and devastate communities across the entire state. She scrolled through her phone's contacts until she found the number she'd saved months earlier during a neighborhood watch meeting. Not 911. She wasn't ready to make that call yet. First, she needed to practice. Driving home to her gated community subdivision 30 minutes away, Linda pulled into her garage and sat in the darkness, rehearsing the words that would soon shatter so many lives. Her voice shook slightly as she practiced the script she'd constructed in her mind, each word designed to create maximum fear and chaos. Hello, 911. I need to report an emergency at Jefferson High School. I overheard a group of students planning a mass shooting for this afternoon. They mentioned specific weapons and targets. Please, you have to do something before it's too late. She practiced the call 17 times, adjusting her tone, adding details that would make her story more credible. Linda convinced herself that she was teaching the school a lesson about favoritism, that the temporary chaos would somehow level the playing field for students like Trevor. The racial undertones of her motivations remained buried beneath layers of self-justification and wounded pride. At 2:32 p.m., 15 minutes before the actual lockdown began, Linda Watkins dialed 911 from her landline phone. The emergency dispatcher, a 26-year veteran named Robert Collins, answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? Please, you have to help, Linda began, her voice artificially frantic. I'm calling about Jefferson High School. I overheard some students talking about shooting up the school today. They mentioned bringing guns and targeting specific teachers and students. I think they're serious. Robert's training kicked in immediately. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Can you provide me with specific details about what you heard? They mentioned the honor roll students specifically, Linda continued, her lies flowing with practiced ease. Something about making them pay for taking opportunities away from other kids. They said they had weapons hidden in their lockers and were planning to act during the last period. Within 90 seconds of Linda's call, Robert had dispatched the information to every law enforcement agency within a 50-mile radius. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Department activated their emergency response protocol, and within minutes, the state police, FBI field office, and National Guard had been notified of a credible threat against multiple schools. The decision to expand the lockdown beyond Jefferson High came from State Emergency Management Director Patricia Hayes, who had been monitoring the situation from the state capitol. With limited information about the scope of the threat and memories of previous school tragedies fresh in everyone's minds, she authorized the precautionary lockdown of all schools in 3 surrounding counties. We can't take any chances, she told Governor Rebecca Thompson during a hurried phone conversation. If there's even a remote possibility that this threat extends beyond one school, we need to protect every child in the region. The governor, who had been in a budget meeting when the call came in, immediately authorized the deployment of additional state resources. Do whatever it takes to keep our children safe, she instructed. We'll sort out the details later. Back at Jefferson High, the lockdown stretched into its second hour. Marcus remained huddled beneath his desk, his honor roll certificate now crumpled and forgotten as SWAT team members moved through the hallways with tactical precision. The sound of breaking glass echoed from somewhere in the building as officers searched every classroom, every locker, every possible hiding place for weapons that would never be found. In classrooms throughout the building, teachers struggled to maintain calm, while their own hearts raced with terror. Mrs. Rodriguez whispered prayers in Spanish as she held her first-grade students close. their small bodies trembling with confusion and fear. Coach Peterson barricaded his gymnasium office door with weight equipment, protecting the 15 members of the track team who had been practicing when the alarm sounded. The media response was swift and overwhelming. News helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures, their cameras capturing every moment of the chaos below. Social media exploded with speculation, fear, and misinformation as parents desperately tried to reach their children, and students attempted to communicate with the outside world despite strict instructions to remain silent. Regina Johnson stood behind the police perimeter with hundreds of other parents, her face streaked with tears as she watched tactical vehicles surround her son's school. David held her trembling hand while they waited for any word about Marcus's safety. The joy they'd felt that morning during the honor roll ceremony seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the raw terror of not knowing whether their child was safe. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step back," Officer Martinez instructed, as Regina pressed against the yellow tape. "We're doing everything we can to ensure every student's safety." "That's my baby in there," Regina sobbed. "My baby who was just being honored for his hard work this morning. Please, I just need to know he's okay." Similar scenes played out at 17 other schools across the region, as parents arrived to find their children's schools surrounded by law enforcement. The ripple effects extended far beyond the immediate area, as news of the multi-school lockdown spread across social media and national news networks. By 4:15 p.m., every major news outlet in the country was covering the story. CNN interrupted regular programming with breaking news updates. Fox News deployed additional crews to the scene. Social media influencers shared unverified information and conspiracy theories that only added to the chaos and confusion. The search of Jefferson High School was methodical and thorough. SWAT teams cleared every classroom, every supply closet, every potential hiding place. They found textbooks and calculators, art supplies, and athletic equipment, but no weapons of any kind. The dogs trained to detect explosives found nothing more threatening than a student's forgotten lunch containing a tuna sandwich. Detective Sarah Kim, a 15-year veteran of the county's Major Crimes Unit, began interviewing students and staff as they were evacuated from the building. The honor roll students, the supposed targets mentioned in the 911 call, were questioned extensively about any threats they might have received or suspicious behavior they might have witnessed. "Has anyone made any statements to you about harming you or other students?" Detective Kim asked Marcus, as they sat in a temporary interview area set up in the school's parking lot. Marcus shook his head, still trying to process the surreal turn his day had taken. "No, ma'am. I can't think of anyone who would want to hurt us. Most people have been really supportive of our academic achievements." Similar interviews with Aisha, James, and the other honor students yielded the same results. No threats, no suspicious behavior, no indication that anyone had reason to target them specifically. As the hours passed, investigators began to suspect that the emergency call might have been based on incorrect information or misunderstood conversations. The breakthrough came at 6:23 p.m. when Detective Kim received a call from the State Police Communications Center. Technician Monica Rivera had been conducting a routine trace of the emergency call when she discovered something that changed everything. "Detective Kim, we've traced the call to a landline registered to Linda Watkins at 1247 Oakwood Drive," Monica reported. "But here's the interesting part: we pulled her cell phone records and found 17 outgoing calls to various numbers in the hour before she called 911. The call duration suggests she was practicing something." Detective Kim felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of practicing?" "Based on the pattern and timing, it looks like she was rehearsing the call she eventually made to us. We've also pulled security footage from the school parking lot during this morning's honor roll ceremony. Linda Watkins was there, and she appears to be filming the students and families. The investigation shifted focus immediately. While tactical teams continued their search of the schools, Detective Kim and FBI agent Robert Torres drove to Linda's suburban home to conduct what they assumed would be a routine interview with a concerned citizen who had reported suspicious activity. Linda answered her front door wearing yoga pants and a designer sweater, her demeanor calm and composed despite the chaos she had orchestrated. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. I've been watching the news about the school situation. It's just terrible what these kids are planning." "Mrs. Watkins, we'd like to ask you a few questions about the call you made to 911 today," Detective Kim began, studying Linda's facial expressions for any signs of deception. "Of course. Anything I can do to help. I just hope you were able to stop those kids before anyone got hurt." Agent Torres consulted his notes. "Can you walk us through exactly what you heard and when you heard it?" Linda launched into her rehearsed story, providing elaborate details about overhearing conversations between students she claimed to recognize from the honor roll ceremony. She described specific weapons, detailed plans, and even mentioned a timeline for the supposed attack. Her performance was convincing, but several inconsistencies began to emerge as the interview continued. "Mrs. Watkins, you mentioned overhearing these conversations near the school parking lot this morning," Detective Kim noted. "But according to your story, the students were discussing plans for an attack this afternoon. Why would they wait 6 hours if they were planning something so serious?" Linda hesitated for the first time. "Well, They mentioned wanting to wait until the afternoon when more people would be in the building. They wanted maximum impact." "And you're certain you recognize these students from the honor roll ceremony?" Agent Torres pressed. "Absolutely. They were the ones getting all the attention, taking pictures with their families. It was obvious they felt entitled to special treatment." The racial undertones in Linda's language didn't go unnoticed by either investigator. Detective Kim exchanged a glance with Agent Torres before continuing. "Mrs. Watkins, we're going to need to examine your phone records and any video you might have taken at the school today." Linda's composure began to crack. "I don't understand why you need my phone records. I'm the one who reported the threat. I'm trying to help keep children safe." "This is standard procedure in cases like this," Agent Torres explained. "We need to verify all the information we receive to ensure we're responding appropriately." While Linda reluctantly provided access to her devices, the search teams at Jefferson High School completed their thorough examination of the building. No weapons were found. No threatening materials were discovered. No evidence of any planned violence existed anywhere in the school. At 7:45 p.m., Principal Martinez stood before a crowd of reporters, parents, and law enforcement officials to announce that the lockdown was being lifted. After an extensive search by local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, no threats or weapons have been found at Jefferson High School or any of the other schools in our district. All students and staff are safe and will be released to their families immediately. The relief among parents was palpable, but the trauma of the day's events would linger for months. Children as young as 5 years old had spent hours hiding under desks, terrified that someone might hurt them. High school students had missed college application deadlines and important exams. Teachers had canceled evening plans to provide counseling and support to traumatized students. Marcus finally reunited with his parents at 8:30 p.m. Nearly 6 hours after the ordeal began. Regina held him tight, tears streaming down her face as she felt his solid, warm presence in her arms. The honor roll certificate that had brought them such joy that morning lay forgotten in his backpack. overshadowed by the traumatic events of the afternoon. "I'm so sorry you had to go through this, baby," Regina whispered into his hair. "I'm so proud of how brave you were today." David wrapped his arms around both of them, his own eyes wet with relief and residual fear. "We're going to get through this together," he promised. "This doesn't change how proud we are of your achievements." But even as families reunited and the immediate crisis passed, investigators were uncovering evidence that would shock the community and lead to charges that no one had anticipated. The analysis of Linda's phone revealed not only the practice calls, but also a series of internet searches that painted a disturbing picture of her motivations. In the days leading up to the honor roll ceremony, Linda had researched previous school shooting incidents, paying particular attention to the emergency response protocols and media coverage. She had visited social media pages belonging to several of the honor students, screenshotting their posts and saving photos of their families. Most damning was a series of text messages Linda had exchanged with her sister Karen, who lived in another state, in which she expressed her resentment toward the special treatment given to minority students and her belief that American kids were being left behind. "These people come here and take everything from our children." One message read, "Someone needs to teach them a lesson about what happens when you push too far." Another message, sent just 2 hours before the false 911 call, was even more explicit. "I'm going to show them what real consequences look like. Maybe then they'll understand that actions have reactions." The pattern of premeditation was clear. Linda hadn't simply misunderstood an innocent conversation or reacted impulsively to a perceived threat. She had deliberately and systematically planned to terrorize innocent children as revenge for their academic success and as punishment for what she perceived as unfair advantages given to minority students. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. What had initially been treated as a potential tragedy averted was now revealed as a calculated act of domestic terrorism motivated by racial resentment and jealousy. District Attorney Michael Chen announced the charges against Linda Watkins at a press conference that drew national attention. Linda Watkins has been charged with making false reports to law enforcement, domestic terrorism, reckless endangerment of minors, and federal hate crime violations. Her actions terrorized thousands of children, traumatized countless families, and wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars in emergency response resources. The community response was swift and decisive. Parents who had initially been grateful for Linda's vigilance in reporting suspicious activity now expressed outrage at her deception. School board meetings became forums for discussing not only improved security measures, but also the need to address the underlying prejudices that had motivated the attack. Governor Thompson called an emergency session of the state legislature to address gaps in the law that allowed false emergency reports to cause such widespread panic. "What happened in Jefferson County represents a new form of terrorism," she declared during a televised address. "We must ensure that our laws reflect the serious nature of these crimes and provide appropriate punishment for those who would weaponize our emergency response systems." The federal response was equally strong. FBI Director James Patterson announced the creation of a task force to investigate similar incidents of racially motivated false emergency reports. The Watkins case represents part of a troubling pattern we're seeing across the country, he explained during a congressional hearing. Individuals using emergency services as weapons against minority communities, knowing that the response will be swift and traumatic. The honor roll students, meanwhile, struggled to process their role as unwitting targets in Linda's scheme. Marcus found himself the subject of media attention he never wanted, with reporters asking him to comment on being targeted because of his race and academic achievement. "I just want to focus on my education," He told a local news reporter during one of the few interviews he granted. "What happened to us was wrong, but I won't let it stop me from pursuing my goals. If anything, it makes me more determined to succeed." Aisha Patel, whose parents had immigrated to provide better educational opportunities for their children, spoke at a community rally about the impact of the incident. "For 6 hours, I thought someone wanted to hurt me because I work hard in school," she said, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. "That's not the America my parents dreamed of when they came here." The legal proceedings against Linda Watkins moved quickly through the court system. Her initial plea of not guilty was abandoned when prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of her premeditation and malicious intent. Text messages, internet search history, phone records, and surveillance footage painted an undeniable picture of calculated terrorism. During the sentencing hearing, victim impact statements from students, parents, and teachers filled the courtroom with powerful testimony about the lasting trauma caused by Linda's actions. Principal Martinez spoke about the ongoing counseling needs of students who had been terrorized by the lockdown. Teachers described their own struggles with anxiety and hypervigilance in the months following the incident. But perhaps the most powerful statement came from Marcus Johnson himself, who had initially been reluctant to participate in the proceedings, but ultimately decided that his voice needed to be heard. "Mrs. Watkins, I don't understand why you thought I deserved to be terrorized for working hard in school," he said, looking directly at Linda as she sat at the defendant's table. "I don't understand why you thought my classmates and I should be punished for achieving our goals. But I want you to know that your actions haven't broken our spirits or diminished our dreams." He paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "What you did was meant to tear our community apart, to make us afraid of success, to punish us for being different. Instead, you've brought us closer together. You've shown us the importance of standing up against hatred and prejudice. And you've made us more determined than ever to use our education to build a better world." Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Linda Watkins to 15 years in federal prison, with additional time to be served concurrently on state charges. "Your actions represent one of the most callous and calculated attacks on innocent children I have encountered in my 23 years on the bench," she stated during the sentencing. "You weaponized fear itself, turning our protective instincts into instruments of terror against the very children we seek to protect." The judge continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You targeted these students, not because they posed any threat, but because their success challenged your worldview. You sought to punish achievement, to terrorize excellence, and to weaponize our emergency response systems against minority children. This court will not tolerate such acts of domestic terrorism." In the months following Linda's sentencing, the Jefferson County community worked to heal from the trauma while implementing changes designed to prevent similar incidents. The school district partnered with mental health organizations to provide ongoing counseling services for affected students and staff. New protocols were established for verifying emergency reports and preventing the kind of widespread panic that had gripped the region. The state legislature passed the Jefferson County Protection Act, which established severe penalties for false emergency reports targeting schools and created a fund to compensate communities affected by such hoaxes. The law also required emergency response agencies to implement verification procedures that could prevent single, unsubstantiated calls from triggering massive responses. Perhaps most importantly, the incident sparked a broader conversation about the racial prejudices that motivated Linda's attack. Community forums were established to address bias and discrimination in educational settings. The school district implemented mandatory training for all staff on recognizing and addressing prejudice. Parent education programs were created to help families discuss issues of race, privilege, and equality with their children. Marcus Johnson graduated as valedictorian 2 years later, using his graduation speech to reflect on the incident that had transformed his community. 2 years ago, someone tried to turn our achievements into targets, our success into reasons for fear, he told the packed auditorium. They thought they could use hatred to tear us apart, to make us afraid of reaching for our dreams. He looked out at the audience, which included many of the same families who had celebrated with him at that honor roll ceremony that seemed so long ago. Instead, they taught us the true power of unity, the importance of standing together against prejudice, and the responsibility that comes with privilege and opportunity. They didn't break us, they made us stronger. The other honor students had similarly thrived in the years following the incident. Aisha Patel earned early admission to MIT, where she planned to study engineering. James Chen won a full scholarship to Stanford University for his environmental science research. Each of them carried forward not only their academic achievements, but also a deeper understanding of the challenges facing their communities and their responsibility to create positive change. The trauma of that February afternoon would never be fully forgotten, but it had been transformed into something else entirely. What Linda Watkins had intended as an act of destruction and division had become a catalyst for growth, understanding, and unity. The honor roll students she had targeted became advocates for educational equity and social justice. The community she had tried to divide came together stronger than before. On the 5th anniversary of the incident, Jefferson High School held a special assembly to honor not only the academic achievements of their students, but also the resilience and courage they had shown in the face of hatred. The auditorium where Marcus and his classmates had once celebrated their honor roll recognition was now filled with current students, community members, and officials who had worked to transform a moment of terror into a foundation for hope. Principal Martinez, now nearing retirement, reflected on the lessons learned during those difficult years. What we discovered, she told the assembled crowd, is that our greatest strength lies not in our ability to prevent every act of hatred, but in our capacity to respond with love, unity, and determination to build something better from the ashes of what others tried to destroy. The memorial garden planted outside the school served as a permanent reminder of both the trauma endured and the growth that followed. 15 oak trees, one for each honor student who had been targeted, stood strong and tall, their branches reaching toward the sky like the dreams and aspirations they represented. A plaque at the base of the garden bore a simple inscription, "In memory of fear, overcome, and unity achieved." Linda Watkins remained in federal prison, her appeals exhausted, and her name forever associated with one of the most shameful acts of domestic terrorism the region had ever witnessed. Her son Trevor, now in college, had publicly distanced himself from his mother's actions and worked to rebuild relationships with classmates and community members affected by her crimes. The ripple effects of that single false phone call continued to influence policy and procedure far beyond Jefferson County. Federal agencies now maintained databases of false emergency reports to identify patterns and prevent coordinated attacks. Emergency response protocols were refined to balance the need for immediate action with the importance of verification and measured response. Educational institutions across the country studied the Jefferson County incident as a case study in crisis management, community resilience, and the importance of addressing underlying prejudices that could motivate such attacks. The honor students involved became sought-after speakers at conferences and symposiums, sharing their experiences and insights with educators, law enforcement officials, and community leaders. As Marcus Johnson prepared for his final semester at Harvard Law School, specializing in civil rights and education law, He often reflected on the path that had brought him to this point. The honor roll certificate from that February morning, carefully preserved and framed, hung in his apartment as a reminder of both the joy of achievement and the responsibility that came with success. His future plans included returning to Jefferson County to work on educational equity issues and to help other communities address the kinds of prejudices that had motivated Linda Watkins's attack. The trauma of that day had not diminished his dreams, but had expanded them, adding layers of purpose and meaning that would guide his career for decades to come. The story of what happened at Jefferson High School became more than just a cautionary tale about the dangers of hate and false reporting. It became a testament to the resilience of communities, the power of truth to overcome deception, and the ability of young people to transform trauma into purpose. Most importantly, it demonstrated that hatred, no matter how carefully planned or maliciously executed, cannot ultimately prevail against the combined forces of justice, unity, and hope. In the end, Linda Watkins had sought to teach the community a lesson about consequences and reactions. The lesson they learned, however, was not the one she intended. They learned that excellence should be celebrated, not punished. They learned that diversity strengthens communities rather than threatening them. And they learned that the true measure of a society lies not in its ability to prevent every act of hatred, but in its capacity to respond with wisdom, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to justice for all its members. The honor roll students who had been unwitting targets of domestic terrorism grew up to become doctors, teachers, engineers, and leaders who carried forward the values their community had embraced in response to hatred. Their achievements stood as living proof that no act of terrorism, no matter how calculated or cruel, could ultimately diminish the power of education, determination, and hope to create a better future for all.